And welcome, Hoosier fans, to another episode of Doing the Work, the first show on the Back Home Network dedicated to covering Indiana women's basketball. Today is our 131st episode, recorded on the evening of Wednesday, October 23rd, 2024. And I'm your host, Kathy Amos, joined tonight by my co-host, Jeff Marlow. And tonight we'll be taking a deeper dive and breaking down the IU schedule. But before we jump into that, I will start off as we do every show, and that's with our Hoosier Proud banner moment. And Jeff, for me, I'm going to go back to just a couple of days ago when it was announced that the highly recruited 2026 5'7" point guard Ashlyn James committed to Indiana on the night of Hoosier Hysteria, which was on Friday. She was highly recruited and had narrowed her list down from to Miami, Marquette, and Indiana. But there were a lot of schools that had provided her offers as well. She is from Louisville. She is said to be a lightning quick guard. She can get to the brim and she passes very well and is a solid shooter per a 24/7 sports article. And I think the favorite thing that I read about her is when she was asked about why in part she committed to Indiana. She said, it just felt like family. And for me, that was my Hoosier Proud banner moment because, again, it's just another recruit coming in and talking about the family-like atmosphere that Coach Moore has built. But not only that, she looks to be, at least on paper and a little bit with the film that I was able to see, to be sort of that athletic guard that we've been talking about here for years. So for me, this was an exciting recruit. Now, of course, 2026 is a long way away. We never know how freshmen will pan out and what will happen between now and then. But just the fact that Coach Morin and staff was able to get into this recruitment and really pull that out away from a lot of other schools, to me, says a lot about the program again. And as usual, our banner moment is brought to you by Home Field Apparel, the presenting sponsor of the Back Home Network, who includes Assembly Call, Crimson Cast, X's and Joe's, and now the Dribble Drive with Austin Render. Home Field is constantly releasing new schools or updating their product lines for schools, products for schools in their existing line. So you are bound to find something for you or anyone in your life that just loves great collegiate gear. And it's a big weekend coming up, not just for our football team and the university and everyone going, but this is a big weekend for Home Field Apparel because I believe they will be on campus this Saturday with some of their pop-up stores, which is a great weekend for them. So if you're going to be in town Saturday, go look them up. But if not, go to homefieldapparel.com. And if it is your first time purchasing, use our promo code HOME23 to get 15% off your entire first order. Again, that's promo code HOME23 for 15% off. The website is homefieldapparel.com. Wear one for the team. All right, so I'll hit a couple other quick news headlines here, Jeff, and then I'll kick it over to you. So I mentioned Hoosier Hysteria was on Friday night. For the women's side, Shea Chesky won the three-point contest. I think more interesting to me than that was the fact that Lily Meister was also in that group that was chosen to participate in the three-point contest. That was in addition to Sydney Parrish and Lene Beaumont. Speaking of Sydney Parrish, Megan McCowan Wallace from the Big Ten Network is coming out with her top 20 returning players. Sydney Parrish came in at number 14, and then just announced today, Chloe Moore McNeil was number 12 on Megan's list. So inching our way ever closer to that first official game, getting closer and closer. So Jeff, what is on your mind with your Marlow's musings today?
No, it was nice to see us get a recruit and interesting, and you couldn't find a number for her as far as like an ESPN ranking or anything like that. So right. Maybe just a tad off the radar, but again, Terry Moore has found some success with those types of recruits. I thought it was interesting on Hoosier Hysteria, the people who were taking part in the three-point contest, as you mentioned, Kathy, and then also Zach Osterman had tweeted out earlier that day that the women were not going to hold a scrimmage on the at Hoosier Hysteria. And then there was a report, at least I was given a heads up, that Yarden was seen walking around campus with her right wrist in some type of brace. So interesting to see where that goes from here. If there's anything to that, maybe it's precautionary or anything like that. But so we'll see where we get from there and see what we find out as we head towards the first set of games here. I do think they have an exhibition game with Marysville coming up, I believe, next week. And that that game's probably on BTN Plus, and we will not be doing a live show after the exhibition game.
No, that's right. That is on Wednesday. You're right, so, the 30th.
So we will not be doing that. But other than that, it's just again kind of a slow week. We're just waiting for the season to get started.
That's right. All right, Jeff, well, let's just go ahead and jump into it. So just to kind of set expectations for all of our listeners out there, we are talking about the schedule. We're giving our overall thoughts, but we are saving any kind of overall predictions for like a win-loss record or a conference standing or anything like that until our next show, which will be next Thursday, where we will do a more robust kind of look into what kind of predictions we may have. And included in that will be our schedule, our record. So, but let's talk about the schedule, Jeff. I thought we'd break this down into non-conference first to start with, and then dive into the conference play and kind of break that down by month, if you will. So you already mentioned we do have a exhibition game against Maryville on October 30th. For those who are able to watch, you can watch that on Big Ten Plus. So let me run through some of the other non-conference games that we have real quick, and then I'll just let you give us your overall thoughts, and then I can chime in after that. So our first game is November 4th, and that will be against Brown at home. Followed by another home game against Harvard. Then we go on the road to Butler. So not too far away, but still on the road. And then we have number 30th in terms of receiving votes, number 30, Stanford coming home. We have then the Bahamas trip, which is starting off with Columbia University. And then we would play, we'll get into probably a little bit more of that. And then on December 1st, we have Maine, December 4th, Southern Indiana, December 15th, Bellarmine, December 22nd at home is Oklahoma. So those are all at home. So we really have one away against Butler. And then, of course, the away games are the neutral site games rather in Atlanta. So why don't you go ahead, Jeff, and give us your thoughts first on our non-conference schedule. You're on mute, just so you know. It looks like there you go.
That one game is Oakland, not Oklahoma. I would love to have Oklahoma on the schedule. I think that's
did I say Oklahoma? Boy.
Yeah, you said Oklahoma.
That's all day I've been doing that stuff.
It is one of the things that I think is going to be something we look at later in the year. The non-conference schedule is fairly weak. They're not playing a real marquee team outside of Stanford, and who really knows what Stanford's going to have. They lost their two best players to A, graduation, and B, the transfer portal. Got a new coach as Tara Vanderveer retired. From that standpoint, that's why the battle for Atlantis is going to be so huge. They got to win that first game, because if they can win that first game, you're likely getting Baylor in the semi. If you can win the second game, you possibly get North Carolina in the final. So I think it's really important for them. Again, we're trying to not do predictions today, but I think they've really got to at least get to the semi against Baylor. That's the one thing that can help their strength of schedule. The non-conference part of the schedule is not going to help their strength of schedule. And I get it. It's the first year of the post-Mackenzie Holmes era, but I would have liked to see them try to find another marquee matchup. I get it. You expect to win against Columbia in that first game at the Battle for Atlantis. But if you don't, I think the non-conference strength of schedule is really going to take a hit come tournament time and seeding time. So, again, the conference schedule is going to have all kinds of stuff. I get that. But I would have liked to see them going out and get one more marquee game that they knew they would get for sure.
Yeah, I agree. I think, probably a couple of things that my thoughts are on that. Stanford probably, I don't know if we were expecting a drop off from, a top 5, top 10 team all the way to not even in the top 25. If you count up the votes they had, I called them number 30, but they're not ranked right now. So a lot of people, not just us, are not quite sure what's going to happen with Stanford. They did lose a lot of firepower and with a new coach coming in. So you don't really know how that game's going to go. Stanford could be a lot better than maybe we're expecting too. So you don't know what you're, like you said, what you're getting with that. And I agree, the battle for Atlantis, you got to win that first game with Baylor to kind of get to the other ones. And I feel like this has been a theme with almost all of the Big Ten teams that we've looked at. Not a lot of them have a really strong non-conference schedule in terms of strength of schedule or in terms of traveling. So it seems like with the increased strength of the Big Ten and the fact that, they're going to have a few more road games going out west for at least 2 of those games, it seems to me, at least on paper, that maybe in addition to what you're saying with having lost Mackenzie Holmes and Sarah, I think the schedule was a bit put into place with the fact that Big Ten, you have more games now this year, and they're probably a little tougher ones on there. We already had a pretty big, deep conference between with the Big Ten before, and now you add in, especially UCLA and USC, it really makes it a tough. But you're right, you're hanging your hat on making a lot of ground into that Big Ten schedule. So in addition to Baylor, you mentioned, or excuse me, in addition to Columbia, you could possibly see Baylor in the final or Baylor UNC in the final. Other teams in that are Southern Miss, Ball State, Texas A&M, and Villanova. So there are some other teams too that we could potentially see matchups, but it would be much better to make sure we get down that championship leg and try to make it, especially if we make it to the championship game, where that game will be on ESP2, because as we've talked about before, those first 2 games in that battle for Atlantis are on something called Flow Hoops, which is notoriously not great quality, and it's rather pricey to get for just a potential of maximum 3 games, but hopefully only 2. So, for us fans, selfishly, would like to also see them get to that championship game to see them on ESPN too. But nothing else really sticks out, does it, in that non-conference schedule?
No.
Anything else you want to touch on with that?
Well, it's what you should give it a Big Ten schedule. Honestly, they are playing all their games at home except the one game at Butler, and then obviously the neutral games down in the Bahamas at the Battle for Atlantis. So that part doesn't surprise me. Again, I would have liked to see them maybe go out and find another, even if it was a neutral site, play somebody in Indianapolis, that you would have been a Power 4 team, something, or a Gonzaga, somebody that, that might have helped. Because, you mentioned some of the other teams at the Battle for Atlantis. They're not, in my opinion, those other teams, even if they win, they're not helping your strength of schedule type stuff come into the year. And again, we're going to hit the conference schedule here in a second, but I just feel like there was an opportunity there for another marquee game that would have helped. And not that we need a lot of media attention anymore, because we're getting, we're ranked again, and Terry Moore has built a program that we don't need it per se. But I just think the more eyes you get on the program at any time on an ESPN or a Peacock type game, anything where you're drawing national attention, Fox, that would have been the kind of game I would like to see them go get. But like you said, Kathy, we discussed some of the other Big Ten teams in the previews. Not a lot of teams, maybe Iowa, about the only team that's really going out and playing anybody of consequence in the non-conference schedule.
Yeah, I think Maryland did as well, if I remember. But yeah, we did a number of previews, and just to point out, Sue here in the chat also mentioned that it's probably something that colleges are looking at, spending less money to travel. Again, you've got those 2 guaranteed games that you're going out west, and you're right, that probably came into play a little bit as well, Sue. So thanks for pointing that out. I don't think Butler, that's technically our only road game. I don't think Butler's going to be much of a, hopefully it's one of those games where you got to win it, and you're not gaining a whole lot by winning it, because you should be expected to win it, but you could really hurt yourself by losing it. So that would be a game to definitely keep an eye on. I'm assuming, again, Jeff, Butler is not expected to make any kind of real noise this year, are they?
Don't think so.
No. Okay, well, with that, let's jump into the conference schedule. So we always have 2 in December. We will have Penn State here fairly early on. That will be on December 7th. That will be in Penn State. It will be on Big Ten Plus. And then after that, in December on the 28th, we have Wisconsin coming into Bloomington. So Jeff, what are your thoughts on those 2 early Big Ten matchups? One away at Penn State and one home late in the month against Wisconsin.
Well, again, they're not. You don't want to do predictions per se, but those got to be wins. You got to go to Penn State and win. You got to beat Wisconsin home. Now, Wisconsin will be an improved team, but I'm still not sure they're in the top half of the league, even with their improvement. But they will be dangerous, especially up in Madison. So you got to win this game here coming back to Bloomington. And that really does kick off the conference schedule, even though they play Penn State earlier in the month. Wisconsin kind of really kicks off the rest of the schedule into the conference season.
Yeah, that's right. Even though I put Wisconsin in December, it is on the 28th. Then they will take a little bit of a break before they really jump into full-blown, all-out Big Ten schedule from December 28th on. They do not have any other non-conference games scheduled, which I believe Maryland did do that, right? It was Maryland that we talked about, that squished one non-conference game in their January. So. Yeah. So we did not do that, thankfully. So I'm going to run down our January schedule here real fast. It'll go really quickly and then we'll dive into the details because it's quite the gauntlet to start out with, I think. So on January 4th, you have number 5 coming to town with UCLA. And then right after that, you have Northwestern on the road. Then you go to Iowa on the road, who is receiving votes. And if you count the votes up, they're number 26. Then you come back home for number 29, Illinois. And then right after that, 3 days later, you have number 3, USC coming to town. And then right after you turn around on the 24th, so 5 days later, you go out to Oregon. And you're just going to stay there because then 3 days later on the 27th, you play Washington. So to me, you look at January, and that is definitely a time you better hope that team is gelling pretty quick because you're starting right off the bat with UCLA. But Jeff, what are your thoughts on the January schedule?
Well, the schedule and kind of how the season in terms of where we're going to fit into the Big Ten is going to be, in my opinion, in that first, you get the right after January 1, you're going to get UCLA, Iowa, Illinois, USC in a 5-game stretch. You get Northwestern in there, but that 4 out of 5 games there where you're playing some of the best teams in the league is going to really go in terms of where you will slot into the conference race. And again, UCLA and USC are going to be tough, but you've got to find a way to win one of them perhaps. And if you want to be toward the top third of the league, and remember, we say top third of the league, we're talking top 5, top 6 now when you got 18 teams. So, and we talked about this in some of the previews. The schedule is, the how you drew teams, when you play them, where you play them is going to be huge. And I agree, Kathy. One of the things we're really going to see is where we are in early January. Is this team gelled, or are we going to be talking a little bit later in February where this team maybe comes together late and makes, is able to make a little bit of a run in February, March. But this team has the potential to be really, really good. It's just a matter of whether they can put it all together early enough that they're ready for that gauntlet in early January.
Yeah, that's right. And, we point out the 4 of the 5 games between UCLA on the road at Iowa, at home against Illinois, and at home in USC. But, not knowing with Oregon as a particular, when we previewed them, they just have so many transfers coming in and freshmen coming in. I think they're tied with, Maryland for the most newcomers onto their team. I mean, it's just staggering, something like 10 of their 15 or something. Don't quote me on the exact numbers. I'm not quite sure that we're going to know how that is. And, we're not quite sure how the travel schedule is going to work and how is that. And this is our first foray into that this year. And having those 2 games to end your month, I don't want to just necessarily chalk them up as wins either. And so that entire month of January is going to be incredibly important to me, I think, as well. And we'll really see what it's made of. And we're going to see right away on January 4th what our home crowd is going to look like too.
Mm-hmm.
The students won't be back. So we really got to have a lot of our non-student fans coming in there and packing Assembly Hall, because they're going to need every bit of help they can get against UCLA. And then the same thing on January 19th with USC coming into town. So those 2 in particular are going to be some pretty key matchups. If the team really wants to go undefeated at home, by far, I think those are going to be the biggest test. Now, I'm not trying to discount Illinois or any of the other teams coming into Assembly Hall in January, but I think those 2 in particular are pretty important in terms of trying to keep that undefeated streak alive in Assembly Hall. Any other thoughts on January?
Yeah, I wouldn't overlook Illinois is part of that gauntlet. You could very easily, I hate to say it this way, but even if we played well, there's a chance you can go 0-3 in those home games.
That's true. That's absolutely true. Illinois may not be ranked in the top 25, but we talked about them extensively about how much of their the returning production is coming in. Production over prediction, right? We've been hearing that a lot here during the football season, and it applies, I think, to basketball too, and especially in basketball, a sport that you really need a lot of people to be playing together as one and understand how they like to play on offense and how you can talk on defense and how you fit into the scheme, and learning new schemes, I think, is very important. So you're right. Illinois has definitely, and we'll talk about Nebraska here in just a second, that we have in February, but you're right. I wasn't trying to discount Illinois coming into town on the 16th either, but that January schedule really doesn't leave a whole lot of wiggle room for them to take a night off at all. All right. Well, with that, I started alluding to February. Let's just go ahead and talk about it. So February is opening up at home against Nebraska. Nebraska is ranked in the top 25 at number 23. Then they're at home against Rutgers. Then they go on the road to Minnesota, then and Michigan. Come back home for Purdue, and then number 14, Ohio State at home. And then they go again on the road up to Michigan State. So again, Michigan State is getting some votes. They're right at around number 31 if you count those votes. And then you come back home to 18 Maryland. And then you finish out your regular season on the road up in West Lafayette with Purdue on March 2nd before you jump into Big Ten play. So Jeff, what jumps out to you in that February and March kind of time frame there?
Well, the three games with Nebraska, Ohio State, and Maryland jump out to me, and obviously the Purdue games are important because those are the double play you're going to get. Interesting that they basically are playing them twice within a couple of weeks. But in my opinion, again, Purdue at home in West Lafayette for them, I should say, is going to be a tough game. But the Nebraska, OSU, Maryland, again, I think that'll go a long way toward where you see IU slotting in the conference standings. Can you win all three because they're all at home?
Yeah, that's right. Again, if you're looking again at here in terms of favors of the schedule. So we just talked about how hard January is. Again, I don't think there's any night in the Big Ten that you can certainly just sit back and chalk everything up to a guaranteed win. You cannot take a night off. But if you're going to look for things that broke our way, having those teams coming into Bloomington, Nebraska, Ohio State, and Maryland, I think was definitely a good break for us. Now, again, Michigan State, I have that one kind of circled as well as one we really have to pay attention to. We have had a little bit of problems with Michigan State in the last couple of years off and on. They are looking like they're returning quite a few players and, being ranked number 31, if you will, being ranked. It's not a team you want to overlook either. And so, the nice thing is that it's a little bit of a breather compared to January, but it's not something where you can just sit down and go, oh, well, we're just going to take kind of a night off. We're going to play the first half, and then the second half, it'll be fine because we'll coast through it. I don't think there's any games like that in the Big Ten this year.
Nope. I agree with that.
Yeah, and then we get into the Big Ten tournament. And Jeff, maybe for our listeners, you want to talk about how the Big Ten tournament is going to look this year, because it will be a little different now that we're going to 18 teams.
And what I didn't even think to look at the tournament, but it's only 14 of the 18 teams I think get in the tournament, or 15 of the 18. So there's 3 to 4 teams that don't make the tournament. And obviously you don't want to be one of those 3 or 4, because if you're in the tournament, at least you got a chance to win it. But again, where you slot in your seating for the Big Ten tournament is going to be huge, because you want to play fewer days rather than more days.
That's right. Yeah, I want to say it's 14. I'll try to fact check us here while we're talking. So Jeff, what overall, as you kind of look over that schedule now that we've kind of broke it down between non-conference, we talked about the basically 3 months of conference play that we have, 2.5. What are your overarching thoughts about that schedule in front of us?
Well, overall, it's a pretty darn good schedule, because the Big Ten is going to be so good. But you're going to have to really run the table, I think, in the non-conference schedule, with the exception of the Atlantis games, because you just don't know who you're playing. You need to beat Columbia. You got to beat Columbia, and then the other known teams that you have in the non-conference. So go undefeated with the known teams, and then see what happens if you get to Baylor and North Carolina. But at the very minimum, you're going to prepare yourself by playing those teams. That's why that Columbia game is so important for me down in Atlanta. But other than that, you really need to run the non-conference schedule. Then it's just simple. You know, again, we're not trying to do predictions, but you got to win as many of your home games as you can. I know you got some really good teams coming into Bloomington, but it has to be a home court advantage. You have to find a way. If you know, I hate to say upset, but if you're going to, you know, pull the upsets, more likely it's going to be at home, at USC, at UCLA, you know, that those types of teams that are coming into Bloomington, you know, first time they've been to Assembly Hall. So, you know, hopefully, you know, coming in there, not that they're going to be scared, but just the environment's going to be a little different. So, than maybe what they're used to. So you got to make hay in the home games, and you really got to run the non-conference schedule.
Yeah, that's right. You got to survive January too. So real quick, just to go back, you were right. It's 15 teams that will be at the Big Ten tournament. The women's tournament this year takes place March 5th through the 9th, and it will be back in Indianapolis this year. We didn't talk a whole lot about this, but in terms of where folks can watch the games, the nice thing here is that 13 of these games will be nationally televised. So you will still need a Big Ten Plus subscription if you don't have one. If you want to watch the exhibition, you'll want that. But even quite a few of our first non-conference games are on Big Ten Plus. Then you have Flow Hoops, and then after that, you have Big Ten Network, regular Fox, and Peacock, of course. They'll be on NBC, we'll be on Fox Sports 1, and then back to Big Ten Network. So they're kind of all over the place. But I think when we added it up, 13 of them are going to be on non-Big Ten Plus channels or non-Flow Hoops. So that at least nice is for those folks who maybe don't have Big Ten Plus subscriptions, are not able to get one of those. So that's the nice thing about that as well. And again, that I think that speaks volumes for where our programs has come. I don't know that we would have necessarily gotten that 5 or 6 years ago. And with that, you also get better eyes on the TV and hopefully better for recruiting, and again, dividends after dividends. But yes, I'm with you, Jeff. You really gotta watch what you're doing here with Stanford at home and then going on the road to battle for Atlanta. So those are going to be some really key games to watch in your non-conference, and then just surviving through January. So, Jeff, how about this probably be a nice short one for everyone since we're not making predictions. So why don't we go ahead and give our final thoughts, and then we'll talk to everyone about what's coming up.
Well, you know, final thoughts is getting ready for the season, and it's fun to look at the schedule. Again, we're going to kind of break it down a little bit more next week and give our predictions, but it is interesting. You know, we're getting closer, and again, assuming everybody's healthy, this is a team that really is, you know, replaces basically 2 starters. You got to replace Sarah, which right now looks like Shea Chesky is going to be that person. And then I would imagine Lily's going to get the first shot to be the starter to replace Mac. But they've got some, you know, they've got a lot of pieces to the puzzle. And I don't think you have to really work hard to put the pieces together. Just a matter of how quickly it can mesh and look like a cohesive picture. But it's going to be fun. It's going to be interesting to see how they attack it, and be interesting to see exactly how they treat the non-conference schedule in terms of rotations and trying to build some depth.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's definitely something I'm looking forward to watching on November 4th, even though, you know, maybe it's a game we're kind of writing up to hopefully a guaranteed win against Brown, but you never know. And I'm really interested in seeing how some of these new pieces are fitting in. You know, we have some freshmen coming in. I want to really see how some of our sophomores maybe are taking a leap from last year's as freshmen. Even that, our sophomores from last year's, I'm looking forward to seeing how they come as a junior. I want to see, Lexi's new shot that we keep hearing about. And so we're getting really, really close here now with November 4th lurking around the corner. I think we're less than 2 weeks away from that, if I did my math right. But I have been suspect with my math and finding the right words today. So I wouldn't count on that. Just circle November 4th in terms of on your calendar for the official opening day for our Lady Hoosiers. So, Jeff, real quick, let's pivot before we wrap everything up. I think you went to the Nebraska football game this last Saturday. yeah, so let's pivot. I know we're a basketball school, but we're leaning towards football now too. And it's kind of hard if you're talking anything Indiana these days not to touch on football. So what were your overall thoughts from the Nebraska game, and how much fun did you have?
Oh, it was a blast, and the place was the most electric I might have seen it in 30 years. When I first had my season tickets 30 years or so ago, it was the early Mallory year, or the Mallory years there in the 90s, when they're kind of at the end of that really great run with Bill Mallory, and there were a lot of really good crowds, a lot of electricity. And that was but it was packed. It was fun. The students were were into the game. We got there early enough. We hung out around the Big Noon kickoff and saw some of that. As well. Game Day's coming this week with ESPN. So they're promoting Red Out this week, which I thought was interesting for the game against Washington. But yeah, I'll be honest, I thought they'd win the game, but I didn't think they would put 50 plus up, and I didn't think it'd be 56-7, even though I loved it because Nebraska's done that to many a team over the years. But it was fun. It was exciting. The team played well. You just get more and more of a sense that this staff has, they're working the plan they have. They kind of that old adage, work your plan, plan your work. And you see that really coming through with that. But I thought it'd be more like a 27-14, 24-10 type game because I thought Nebraska's defense would give them a little bit stiffer challenge. But so this week, no Curtis Rourke. Rourke is out with a thumb injury this week. And so hopefully Taven Jackson can step in. I thought they did a good job with Taven on Saturday of just giving him safe plays. Didn't make it hard. We didn't give him a ton of reads and things. So we'll be interested to see what he looks like this week. But it's just exciting to see IU football have some excitement.
That's right. I know my husband and I watched it in our backyard. We have a couple outdoor TVs and we sat on the patio. It was nice here in Iowa as well. And I just remember a couple of times people either texting me or looking at my husband. I'm going, boy, I hope if our neighbors have their windows open, they're not too upset with all the yelling and hollering in a very positive way. Maybe a few adult words were thrown out there as well, but we were ecstatic and we had so much fun, even though it was just the two of us watching that game on Saturday. So we'll look forward to doing it again. Although I have a wedding to go to on Saturday afternoon, and so we may end up missing the end of the Washington game coming up. But yeah, there's just so much positivity surrounding our football program that hopefully will bleed over into the basketball program as we get into that as well. So, all right, Jeff, I think that'll do it. And last words at all for you before we hit some Bob Thompson music, and then we'll talk about what's next.
Nope, I'm good.
All right. Well, great. Well, this was a nice, short and sweet one since we're not doing any predictions, but that will be our next show. So we will be coming not on our normal Wednesday time. I have a conflict on Wednesday. So we will do our show on Halloween, October 31st. It will be at 8 Eastern, 7 Central. So mark your calendars. We try to keep that pretty even, at least in terms of time we start when we don't have a post-game show. But not only will we be making any predictions, if you follow us on Twitter or if in Substack, you will see that we are also taking any questions that you want us to still kind of hit and address for you before the season gets kicked off. So go ahead and think about that and hit Jeff and I up on Twitter. You can find us at Doing the Work on Twitter. But if you really want to be part of a great community, you can go to simplycall.substack.com. And that's where you can find out about our private community over there. In terms of the show, if you want to see us do the show live and be part of the live chat, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/@BackHomeNetwork. A special thanks to John Ringer of Riggs Design for designing our logos. Also, a big thank you to Bob Thompson for our music that you heard through the broadcast. And most of all, thank you all for listening, either live or after the fact. We appreciate each and every one of you. But we will be back to talk with you with IU Hoops again in 1 week and 1 day. Until then, keep your elbow in, your eyes on the rim, and let's go Hoosiers. All right. Nice.
Nice and tight.
Yes. Even with a little football scheduling or talk in there rather. So, all right. Halloween's just around the corner, which that definitely means basketball is really right around the corner. So
Yes,
that's
it
exciting.
is.
Love it.
Yes, it is. So, hey, I'm going to get out of here. I got a couple
Me
things
too.
to do here. So I will talk to you
Sounds
next
good.
week.
Sounds
Bye,
good. Good
everybody.
night, everybody.